The basement dweller. When life imploded and I found myself suddenly homeless, desperation drove me to scroll endlessly through roommate listings online. That's when I stumbled upon Luke's ad, a room for rent in his 3-bedroom house at a price that seemed too good to be true. Looking back, I should have trusted that old adage. But beggars can't be choosers, and I was most definitely begging. The ad laid out some basic ground rules in all caps. No parties, no large gatherings, no drinking in common areas, and most intriguingly, no use of the basement. Standard enough requests, I thought naively. If only I had known then what horrors lurked beneath the floorboards of that seemingly innocuous suburban home. When I arrived to view the place, Luke answered the door with an awkward, twitchy energy that set my nerves on edge. His voice trembled as he showed me around, eyes darting nervously as if expecting someone, or something, to jump out at any moment. But the bedroom was spacious, the rent was cheap, and I was desperate. I agreed on the spot, shaking his clammy hand to seal the deal. 2 days later, I moved in, relishing my newfound independence. Luke had emphasized again that the attic and basement were off limits, used only for storage. Fair enough, I thought. Everyone's entitled to their private spaces. At first, things seemed normal enough. Luke was rarely home, just as he'd promised. But as days turned to weeks, I began to notice unsettling patterns. His car was always in the driveway, despite his claims of being gone most of the time. And at night, the sounds began, footsteps pacing endlessly, doors opening and closing at odd hours, and sometimes, faintly, what sounded like muffled voices. One night, unable to sleep due to the persistent noises, I ventured out to investigate. The basement door stood ajar, a faint light spilling out from below. As I approached, the sounds grew clearer, a rhythmic banging, like someone striking metal against metal. Heart pounding, I peered down the stairs. There, at the bottom, stood Luke. He stared up at me, his face contorted with barely suppressed rage. "Shut the basement door," he snarled, his voice a guttural growl that barely resembled human speech. I stammered an apology and retreated, but sleep eluded me for the rest of the night as I lay awake, wondering what dark secrets Luke was hiding in the depths of that house. A week later, I returned home to find my bedroom door unlocked. Ice ran through my veins as I realized someone, Luke, had been in my private space. My belongings had been rifled through, clothes disarranged, closet door left slightly open. The violation left me feeling exposed, vulnerable in what should have been my sanctuary. When I confronted Luke, he met my accusations with a blank stare and flat denial. "I don't have a key to your room," he lied, his face an expressionless mask. Before I could press further, he mumbled something about being in a hurry and fled the house. Curiosity and fear warred within me. With Luke gone, I knew this might be my only chance to uncover the truth. Steeling my nerves, I approached the forbidden basement door. The steps creaked ominously as I descended, my phone's flashlight cutting through the gloom. The basement was small, mostly empty save for a ratty couch and some cardboard boxes. But as I explored, a nauseating stench assaulted my nostrils, growing stronger as I approached a locked door in the corner. The smell was like nothing I'd ever encountered, a horrific mix of decay, chemicals, and something I couldn't quite place. Whatever lay beyond that door, I knew instinctively it was the source of Luke's strange behavior. I fled back upstairs, my mind reeling. That night, I tossed and turned, unable to shake the feeling that I was no longer alone in my room. Just as I was drifting off, a floorboard creaked. My eyes snapped open to find Luke looming over my bed, his face half hidden in shadow. "Did you go into the basement?" he whispered, his voice dripping with barely contained menace. I tried to deny it, but he cut me off. "I think you should find other living arrangements," he hissed, before turning and gliding out of the room like a phantom. Panic gripped me. I began throwing my belongings into bags, desperate to escape whatever madness I had stumbled into. When I demanded a partial refund of my rent, Luke's arm snaked out from behind his bedroom door, a wad of cash clutched in his pale fingers. Even this simple transaction felt tainted with wrongness. As I fled into the night, questions swirled in my mind. What horrors lay behind that locked door in the basement? What storage could produce such a horrific stench? And most chillingly, what had happened to Luke's previous tenants? I may never know the answers, but one thing is certain: Some secrets are better left buried, hidden away in dank basements where the light of day never reaches. And sometimes, the most monstrous creatures wear the mask of normalcy, hiding in plain sight until it's far too late to escape their clutches. The Nocturnal Photographer. College is supposed to be a time of growth, of spreading your wings and embracing new experiences. But for me, my junior year became a descent into paranoia and terror, all thanks to my roommate David. When we first met, David seemed normal enough, friendly, polite, always quick with a smile or bit of small talk. But as the days wore on, little oddities began to pile up. The way he would linger in my room, asking probing questions about my personal life. How he would rifle through my belongings when he thought I wasn't looking, as if searching for some hidden secret. At night, strange sounds emanated from his room, muffled whispers, shuffling noises, the occasional thump. I told myself it was just David watching TV or talking on the phone. But deep down, a seed of unease had taken root. One sleepless night, driven by a morbid curiosity I couldn't quite explain, I crept to David's door and pressed my ear against it. What I heard chilled me to the bone, David, whispering to himself in a low, urgent tone. Then, suddenly, silence fell. And in that silence, I heard my own name spoken aloud. Jeff. How did he know I was there? I fled back to my room, heart pounding, mind racing with possibilities. Was David hiding something sinister? Or was I letting my imagination run wild? As the days passed, David's behavior grew increasingly erratic. He would make furtive glances in my direction, his movements becoming jerky and unpredictable. And still, those nightly whispers continued, sometimes right outside my bedroom door. One night, I awoke to the unmistakable sound of my door closing. David's footsteps retreated down the hall. The violation of my personal space was the final straw. I confronted him the next day, asking if he had been sleepwalking. David's response was strange, almost rehearsed. He claimed to have a history of sleepwalking, but something in his eyes told me he was lying. I knew then that I had to uncover the truth, no matter how dark it might be. The next time David left the apartment, I seized my chance. I searched his room frantically, tearing through drawers and closets, looking for any clue that might explain his bizarre behavior. Just as I was about to give up, I found it, a small, hidden drawer at the back of his closet. What I discovered inside turned my blood to ice. Dozens of photographs, all featuring me. Some showed me sleeping, others going about my daily routine. But it was the close-ups that truly horrified me. Images so detailed I could see individual pores on my skin, the texture of my hair. David had been secretly photographing me for months, invading my privacy in the most intimate way possible. Mixed in with the photos of me were pictures of another young man, likely David's previous roommate. I felt sick imagining how long this twisted hobby had been going on. How many unsuspecting victims David had preyed upon. I wanted to confront David, to demand answers and justice. But fear held me back. What if he became violent when cornered? What other dark impulses might be lurking beneath his seemingly normal exterior? In the end, I chose self-preservation over confrontation. I gathered evidence, reported David to the housing department, and fled to a new living situation. But even now, years later, the memory of those photographs haunts me. I find myself checking dark corners, peering over my shoulder, always half expecting to see David's leering face or the flash of a camera in the shadows. The most chilling part? I never found out what happened to David's previous roommate, the other young man in those photos. Did he escape as I did? Or did David's obsession take an even darker turn? Sometimes, in the dead of night, I still wake up in a cold sweat, convinced I can hear the faint click of a camera shutter in the darkness. And I wonder, am I truly free of David's twisted gaze? Or am I still unknowingly starring in someone else's perverted fantasy, my most private moments captured for eternity without my knowledge or consent? The predator next door. When work forced me to relocate at 23, I found myself adrift in a sea of online housing listings, desperate for an affordable place to call home. That's how I stumbled upon Rob's Facebook post offering a spare room. His profile picture showed a normal-looking guy, and our FaceTime tour of the place seemed promising. The house was modest but well kept, conveniently located near my new office. Rob came across as friendly and easygoing. It seemed like the perfect solution to my housing woes. How naive I was. How easily I ignored the warning signs that, in hindsight, were glaringly obvious. From the moment I moved in, Rob's behavior toed the line between overly friendly and unsettlingly pushy. He insisted on showing me around town, then tried to turn our outing into an impromptu lunch date. When I declined, he immediately pivoted to suggesting drinks instead. His persistence made me uneasy, but I chalked it up to misplaced enthusiasm. It wasn't until I noticed my laundry hamper had been disturbed that true alarm bells began to ring. A pair of underwear had vanished, and the sickening realization of what that might mean gnawed at me. Still, I tried to rationalize it away. Maybe I had simply misplaced them. Maybe I was being paranoid. But the feeling of violation, of being watched in my own home, refused to dissipate. I installed a lock on my bedroom door, desperately seeking some sense of security. Rob's reaction when he discovered it was chilling. He pounded on my door in the middle of the night, voice thick with barely contained rage as he demanded I remove it immediately. The next morning, his texts were terse and threatening. "It comes off today," he wrote, brooking no argument. When I tried to explain my need for privacy, he shut me down completely. Reluctantly, I complied, all the while wondering, how had he known about the lock so quickly? Had he tried to enter my room while I slept? The true extent of the danger I was in didn't become clear until a young woman knocked on our door one day when Rob was out. Her eyes were wide with urgency as she asked if I was living with Rob. When I confirmed it, her face fell. "You need to get out of here immediately," she warned, her voice trembling. "Rob has multiple restraining orders against him from different girls. He's a dangerous, obsessive stalker." My blood ran cold as she explained that she had seen me moving in and had been waiting for an opportunity to warn me when Rob wasn't around. She offered her help, her phone number, anything to get me out of that house as quickly as possible. Panic set in as I realized the precariousness of my situation. I had already paid Rob for the entire month. I was trapped, living under the same roof as a predator who had already shown an unhealthy interest in me. I began secretly packing my belongings, searching frantically for any other housing options. When I found a sublet across town, I seized the opportunity, concocting a story about a family emergency to explain my sudden departure to Rob. His reaction was unsettling. He questioned my story, clearly suspecting I had been warned about him. "Did some girl say something to you?" he pressed, eyes boring into me as if he could extract the truth through sheer force of will. I denied it, but the seed of suspicion had been planted. That night, I awoke to a presence in my room. Rob sat at the foot of my bed, a dark silhouette in the gloom. Before I could scream, his hand clamped over my mouth. "Shush," he whispered, his breath hot against my ear. "Why would I hurt you? Don't believe what these girls say." Revulsion swept through me as he began to caress my leg. In that moment, survival instinct took over. I bolted from the bed, fleeing into the night with nothing but my phone clutched in my trembling hands. The police arrived, but Rob played the part of a confused, wronged landlord to perfection. Without concrete evidence of a crime, their hands were largely tied. One officer pulled me aside, confirming that Rob had a history of arrests related to incidents with women, but without my testimony about that night's events, they couldn't take action. I spent that night in a hotel, jumping at every sound, convinced that Rob would find me and finish what he had started. The next day, I moved into the sublet, grateful for the landlord's understanding of my desperate situation. Even now, years later, the trauma of that experience lingers. I find myself double-checking locks, scrutinizing the faces of passers-by, always on guard for the next predator hiding behind a mask of normalcy. Rob taught me a brutal lesson. That sometimes the most dangerous monsters are the ones who seem the most ordinary, the wolves in sheep's clothing who prey on our trust and goodwill. So to anyone reading this, I implore you, trust your instincts. If something feels off, if that little voice in the back of your mind whispers a warning, listen to it. For in the world of shared living spaces and online listings, not everyone is who they claim to be. And sometimes, the person on the other side of that bedroom door is far more sinister than you could ever imagine.